She's not going to be around forever. I wasn't supposed to hear that, but I did. And once you hear something like that, especially when it's said about you, there's no going back to the quiet ignorance of before. I stood at the top of the stairs, my slippers silent on the old oak floor. The voices drifted up from the kitchen where the clink of coffee mugs and the hush-hush tones of betrayal masqueraded as casual conversation. "We should start planning now, just in case," my daughter-in-law Elise said. "You know how she's been lately, forgetting things, wandering off." Wandering off, I'd gone for a walk, one walk, around the block. My son Matthew didn't push back. That was the worst part. I waited for his voice to rise up to defend me, to remind her that I'd raised him alone, worked double shifts, and never asked for anything. "You're right," he said. "We need to think about the future. Without her. A future without me." That's when something cracked, quietly, internally. I turned back toward my room, heart thudding in my chest, as the laughter from the kitchen stabbed between my shoulder blades like a whispering dagger. This house used to be mine. Every flower in the front yard had my fingerprints. The cabinets, I painted those myself after my husband died. Now I was just background noise, a placeholder. Maybe I was losing things. Not keys or names, but space, dignity, place. I didn't say anything that day, not even when Elise asked if I'd remembered to take my little blue pill. But I remembered everything. Especially the way she looked at me now, like I was already gone. I started noticing other things after that. My mail opened before it reached my hands. My bank statement suddenly routed online. My granddaughter, sweet, sweet Jamie, stopped coming into my room to show me her drawings. And Matthew, my boy, he kissed me on the cheek like he was comforting a patient, not a mother. That night I sat at my window. The porch light buzzed above the empty swing Matthew promised to fix last spring. And I began writing this. Not a letter, not a journal. A confession, because what happened next was no accident. And it started with a whisper. It's easy to convince yourself that you're imagining things, especially when the people around you benefit from that self-doubt. I tried to brush it off. The whisper, the tone, the planning for a future without me. But once that seed is planted, it grows roots in every moment. Like when Elise moved the china cabinet I've had since 1983 into the garage. "It makes the space feel cluttered," she said. Cluttered. My memories were clutter. Or when she told Jamie not to eat the peach cobbler I made. Too much sugar. Grandma doesn't know the new guidelines. Even when I handed Jamie the slice with my wrinkled hand, I saw her glance at her mother waiting for permission. It wasn't always like this. Or maybe I just refused to see it. When Matthew first brought Elise around, she was all gloss and good manners. Pretty in a sharp way. The kind of woman who always seemed aware of the price tags on her own compliments. She hugged me, called me Mama Denise. But I remember how she flinched when I handed her a crocheted blanket that had belonged to Matthew's grandmother. "Oh, how vintage," she said with a tight smile. Still, I tried. God help me, I tried. I gave them this house when Matthew lost his job. Signed over the deed because I wanted my grandchildren to grow up somewhere warm, familiar. I moved into the guest suite. I gave them space. I let Elise redecorate even when she tore down the wallpaper I'd spent weeks choosing with my late husband. But now I see Elise never saw me as a mother-in-law. She saw me as an obstacle. And I wasn't just imagining it anymore. Because the whispering got louder. One night, I left my hearing aids out, sat at the dining table with a glass of water. The walls in this house are thin, and Elise has never been good at whispering when she's angry. She forgets where she puts things. She stares out the window for hours. That's not normal. "Matthew, she's grieving, Liz. Maybe give her a little grace." "Elise grieving? It's been 8 years, Matt." 8 years. As if there were a deadline to miss someone. But something else Elise said that night chilled me more than anything. "She's going to outlive her usefulness, Matt." And then what? Outlive her usefulness? I set the glass down before it shattered in my hand. I don't remember going to bed that night. I just remember staring at the ceiling and wondering what it meant when your own child stops seeing you as someone with a future. A few days later, the real turning point came. I found a document on the printer. They must have assumed I wouldn't bother checking it. It was a brochure, Evergreen Hills Memory Care and Assisted Living. Because dignity deserves a place to call home. There was a yellow sticky note attached, Elise's handwriting. "Ask Dr. T about legal authority if she resists. Durable POA." I stood there frozen, my fingers trembling at the edges of the paper. They weren't just planning a future without me. They were preparing to erase me from the present. And somewhere deep inside me, past the grief, past the humiliation, past the ache, something hard started to form. Something like resolve. Because Elise had made one mistake. She thought I was already gone. But I was still here, still watching, still remembering, still capable of doing something unthinkable. And if I was going to be cut out of the picture, I might as well light the frame on fire first. I woke before sunrise. Not out of habit, but because something in me had changed. It was the kind of quiet only people with nothing left to lose can hear. That dangerous kind of silence where plans form like frost on a window. Invisible at first, until you tilt your head just right. I made my way to the kitchen without a sound, slippers brushing the cold tile. Elise and Matthew were still asleep. Their door was shut. Jamie's soft breathing drifted from her room down the hall, like music from a childhood I no longer owned. I wasn't sure what I was looking for until I found it. Their office drawer. Locked, of course. But I remembered something Elise didn't know. I was the one who installed that desk 20 years ago. And I remembered where the tiny magnetic backup key was taped underneath the third drawer hidden in the rail. I peeled it loose with shaking fingers and clicked the lock open. Inside were neat manila folders labeled in her handwriting. She always printed in sharp capital letters like everything in life needed to be controlled categorized. Denise, finances. Denise, health notes, POA, draft. Unfiled elder law consult, 6-3. I sat down at their computer and clicked open the first file. My social security number, my Medicare details, bank records, and then a draft letter to an elder care attorney. Elise had written, "Patient mother-in-law shows increasing signs of cognitive decline. We are concerned about her ability to make sound decisions, especially regarding property and finances." The words bled on the screen. Cognitive decline. She was documenting me, building a case, one whisper at a time. Suddenly I understood the accidents. The missing mail. The new pills she insisted I take for focus. The way Matthew started correcting me before I even finished my sentences like a script he'd been rehearsed to follow. But Elise had made one more mistake. She forgot I used to be a paralegal. I knew what a draft power of attorney meant. It wasn't just paperwork. It was a weapon. A quiet legal method of taking everything from someone before they even knew it was being stolen. I copied the entire folder onto a USB stick I found in the drawer, tucked it inside the lining of my slipper, closed the drawer, locked it again. No one would ever know, except someone did, because as I turned to leave the office, I caught a glimpse of movement. Jamie, tiny, silent, half asleep, her eyes wide mouth slightly open, holding her pink stuffed rabbit. We stared at each other in the dim blue light of the hallway. "Grandma," she whispered, "are you doing something bad?" I crouched down, my knees popped like bubble wrap. "No, baby," I said softly, brushing her curls from her forehead. "I'm doing something brave." She blinked, thought about that. Then she nodded and padded back to bed like it was just another dream. But it wasn't. It was the start of the end. Because what I did next, what I planned, wasn't brave. It was a betrayal. But sometimes when they start planning a future without you, the only way to survive is to plan one without them first. If I were going to survive whatever Elise was orchestrating, I needed more than just proof. I needed a witness. Someone who still saw me as real. Not a fragile liability, not a fading burden. Someone who remembered I still had a mind, a memory, a name. That someone was next door Rita Jennings. She and I had been neighbors for 27 years, before Elise came along, before the world turned slick with hidden intentions. Rita was blunt, always wore turquoise lipstick, and had a laugh like a lawnmower starting on a cold morning. She was also the only person who ever dared to say that daughter-in-law of yours is a python in pearls. So that afternoon I made an excuse to walk over USB stick tucked into my bra like a secret second heartbeat. I knocked on her door like I always used to before things changed. Rita opened it in her robe with curlers still and cigarette already lit. "Well, well, the ghost of Denise past returns." I smiled. It cracked at the edges. "Can I come in?" She squinted. "You're not dying, are you?" "I'm being erased," I said. Rita didn't laugh. She stepped aside. Inside the living room smelled like cinnamon gum and sarcasm. She poured me coffee in the same chipped mug she used for 20 years. I told her everything. Not all at once, just enough to see if she believed me. The whispers, the printed brochure, the draft power of attorney. Her eyes narrowed and her voice lowered. "Are they drugging you?" I didn't answer, but I slid the bottle across the table. Little blue pills Elise insisted I take every morning. For mental sharpness, she claimed. Rita took one look. "This isn't a memory supplement. This is off-label sedative use. Do you know what this does in higher doses?" I didn't. She leaned closer. "You're not imagining it, Denise. They're trying to make you look unstable. Legally, medically. If they get that POA signed, they can move you into a home and lock the door behind you. I looked at her. Can you help me? Her answer was immediate. Honey, if this were the 1800s, we'd be digging a tunnel right now. We sat for a long time, the silence breathing heavier than either of us. Then she asked the question no one had dared. Why do you think your son's letting her do this? I stared into the steam of my coffee and said something I hadn't allowed myself to think until that moment. Because she's not just his wife anymore. Rita froze. You're not saying... I'm saying I know how Elise works. She wraps herself around people until they forget who they were before her. Matthew wasn't always like this. Do you think, she began. I think I walked in once, 5 years ago, his hands on her back, the way they looked at each other. It was too much, too familiar. Rita exhaled, Jesus. She made him choose between a mother and a marriage, and he chose her. That day, Rita took the USB. She made a copy, one for her lawyer, one for me, one hidden in her freezer. You're going to need leverage, she said, and a plan. I left her house lighter, but also more afraid. Because now there was no turning back. I had someone on my side, but I also had confirmation that Elise wasn't just trying to remove me. She was trying to rewrite me. And the more I watched her, the more I began to understand. Elise didn't want me gone because I was losing my mind. She wanted me gone because I still had it. And because I knew something I hadn't told anyone yet. Not even Rita. Not even myself. But it was crawling toward the surface. And it was going to change everything. I found the photo by accident. It was wedged behind the radiator in the upstairs hallway, half crumbled and singed at one edge like it had once been thrown into the fireplace but never made it all the way in. I only saw it because I was looking for the cat, or pretending to. But there it was, curled brown, stubbornly refusing to disappear. At first I thought it was just one of Jamie's drawings. She had a habit of slipping her artwork between couch cushions or into my coat pockets like little gifts for when I missed her. But this wasn't a child's hand. It was a photograph, old but not ancient, and the moment I looked at it my knees buckled. Because in that picture stood Matthew, my son, leaning against the hood of his old Civic. And next to him, with her arms wrapped around his waist, her face tilted up in that way women only look at men when no one's watching, was Elise. But this wasn't an engagement photo. It wasn't even a honeymoon snapshot. It was dated 6 months before he met her. 6 months before he introduced her to me as a friend from work. And I remembered that time, clearly. Matthew had a girlfriend then, a sweet girl named Anna, a pediatric nurse. He'd said Elise was just a coworker, just someone helping him with a project. But this photo told a different story. They weren't new. They were old. And they had a secret. I sat on the stairs for what felt like hours, just staring at the burned edge of the paper. Why had she tried to destroy this? Why hide a photo if there was nothing to be ashamed of? Unless there was something else she didn't want me or anyone to know. And as I traced the faded ink on the back Elise's handwriting, unmistakable, I found the answer. Keep this safe, our little forever. No more hiding soon. My hand clamped over my mouth. The room began to spin. They were involved before Anna, before anything official, which meant Elise was already manipulating him, already rewriting his choices, already weaving herself into the fabric of his future before I could even see the seams coming undone. It wasn't just control, it was conquest. She hadn't married into this family. She staged it. I should have confronted her right then. Should have shoved the photo in her face and demanded the truth. But I didn't. Because I remembered something Rita said when I showed her the pills, you only win against someone like Elise if they don't know they're losing. So I tucked the photo into my robe pocket, and I smiled at Elise that night across the dinner table. I let her ask about my blood pressure. I let her remind me about my doctor's appointment. I even let her hand me one of those little blue pills which I palmed and later flushed. But now I had something she didn't know I had, and I began to wonder what else was she hiding. Because the more I peeled back the layers, the more I realized Elise hadn't just wanted me out of the picture. She'd wanted me erased because I was the only person left who knew the original painting. And no masterpiece survives once the canvas starts speaking back. Some betrayals hit you in the chest. Others slice slowly like paper cuts layered until you finally notice you're bleeding. That night I couldn't sleep. The photo haunted me, her handwriting, the way Matthew looked at her even back then, like the world was shrinking down to just her skin and her smile. I got up around midnight and walked down the hall toward the kitchen for a glass of water. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, not this time, but habit is a strange thing. When you spend your life quietly taking care of people, you learn to hear things they think are silent. Their bedroom door was open. Matthew wasn't inside. Elise's voice was soft, almost breathless. I crept toward the guest room, the one she used to keep her office supplies in. It had become something else lately. She called it her creative space, said she needed time alone to think. Right. Center herself. The door was open just a crack enough for me to see. He was sitting at the edge of the bed. She stood in front of him, one hand resting on his shoulder. Her robe loosely tied, her body swaying the way women move when they're performing softness. Weaponized femininity. I just don't want to rush it, she whispered. We need to, Matthew said, before she catches on. She already suspects, Elise murmured. She's been watching me, asking questions. I'll handle it, he said. I'll tell her we're only doing what's best. She leaned in, pressed her forehead to his. Promise me, no more hesitation. He didn't answer, he kissed her instead. A long, slow, familiar kiss. I covered my mouth not to stop a scream, but to hold in the bile rising in my throat. It wasn't a marriage anymore. It was a conspiracy. My own son. My blood. The same boy I'd taught to ride a bike, who used to cry into my blouse when he scraped his knees, who once said he wanted to marry someone just like me, was now plotting my disappearance with the woman who smiled across my table every morning. This wasn't just betrayal. This was replacement. The next day I asked him if he could help me trim the rose bushes. A normal request. Familiar. He hesitated. You're not feeling dizzy again, are you? I shook my head and smiled. No, sweetheart, I said. Just thought you could use some fresh air. We trimmed in silence. I watched his hands. The same hands that had fixed my gutters, held my grandson, held her. I waited until his phone rang. Elise's name lit up on the screen, and I said, Funny how you always end up in her room late at night. Those creative thoughts must be contagious. His face drained. I smiled sweetly and went back to clipping roses. Because now he knew that I knew. And I could see it written across his face, panic, guilt, and something else. Fear. The kind of fear that comes when someone realizes the woman they've tried to make powerless still holds the sharpest tools. And I wasn't done cutting yet. The thing about being underestimated is, it gives you room to move. Room to breathe, room to hide, room to watch. And I had been watching for weeks now. I watched the way Elise labeled my pill bottles in Sharpie Focus Calm Sleep like I was a project she was tinkering with. I watched how Matthew avoided eye contact now as if my gaze burned. I even watched how Jamie had begun folding her drawings in half and slipping them into my knitting bag, tiny, quiet messages of loyalty. My granddaughter knew more than anyone realized. Children always do. But what I needed now was proof. Not just Elise's whispering. Not just Matthew's betrayal. I needed something undeniable. So when Elise started saying things like, you already asked me that, or you seem a little confused today, I didn't fight it. I nodded, smiled, played my part. When I misplaced my reading glasses because she'd hidden them, I said nothing, just laughed and blamed old age. And when she offered me a new tea every night steeped in something floral and slightly bitter, I drank it. But only when she watched. What she didn't know was that I had been secretly spitting it out into a glass jar I hid beneath my dresser. Every drop, every memory blend she insisted would help, because I knew what she was doing, and I needed a sample. That night, I brought the jar to Rita. She had a friend at the pharmacy. A week later, I had the results in my hand. Elise had been mixing crushed benzodiazepines into my tea, low enough to not kill me, high enough to cause fatigue, confusion, and the illusion of mental decline. Poison by teaspoon. Gaslighting by mug. And Matthew, he had to know, at least part of it, because you don't sleep beside someone like Elise and stay innocent. But I wasn't angry, not the way I thought I'd be. I was calm, cold, focused in a way I hadn't been since my husband's funeral. They wanted a confused old woman. I'd give them one. They wanted me to forget things. Fine, I started forgetting my place in the house. Accidentally walked into their bedroom one morning while Elise was still in bed. Oh, sorry, thought this was the laundry room, I said, watching her clutch the sheet. I started leaving notes to myself, deliberately vague ones, on the fridge. Messages like, check the garden for keys, or ask Elise about the paper she needs me to sign. It rattled her. I saw it in her eyes. She didn't know if I was slipping or if I was watching. And then I left my biggest clue yet. I casually told Jamie while Elise was nearby, when I go away, I want you to have my music box, the one with the ballerina, but only if your mommy promises not to open it first. Elise didn't react right away. But that night, I found the box half pried open sitting crookedly on my dresser. Empty? Because I had removed the contents, every letter, every photo, every piece of documentation days before. They were safe now. Hidden. Copied. Backed up. Elise was growing desperate. Matthew grew cold. And I was just getting started. Because when someone pushes you into the role of the powerless, there's nothing more dangerous than pretending to stay there. They wanted a future without me. I was going to give them one, but it wouldn't be their future. It would be mine. It came wrapped in kindness. Matthew handed me a folder at the kitchen table, eyes soft, voice syrupy. Elise stood behind him, hands folded like she was praying I wouldn't look too closely. "It's just a form, Mom," he said, sitting across from me. "Nothing big. It just makes it easier for us to help you with, bills, scheduling things, managing errands." Elise chimed in with that rehearsed smile. "Medical things, too. Just in case something happens, it'll save us a lot of trouble at the hospital. You wouldn't want Jamie to see us stressed like that, right?" She was good. I'll give her that. If I hadn't already known, I might have believed her. But I did know. This wasn't about errands. This was about control. The document in front of me was a durable power of attorney with my name typed neatly at the top, giving Matthew full authority over all of my decisions, financial, medical, legal. Elise's name was listed as alternate agent. It was the legal equivalent of surrender. Matthew tapped his pen against the table. "Just a formality," he said. "Dr. Templeton said it's normal at your age." My age. I opened the folder and pretended to read it for the first time, tracing the lines of text with my finger while I watched them. Their nervous glances, Elise biting the inside of her cheek, Matthew blinking too fast. And I realized then they weren't just trying to erase me from their future. They were trying to preemptively bury me. I smiled. "Where do I sign?" I asked sweetly. Elise's shoulders dropped. Matthew let out a relieved breath. "Here," he said, pointing, "right next to the notary block." I picked up the pen, but I didn't sign. Instead, I turned to Elise and said softly, "Do you remember the photo I found?" Her face twitched. "I'm sorry," she said. "You know, the one you tried to burn, the one from before you and Matthew were official." Matthew froze. "What photo?" I set the pen down gently. "Let's be honest," I said. "This whole situation isn't about my health. It's about convenience. It's about making sure the woman who knows your secrets doesn't get a chance to speak." Elise's voice tightened. "Denise, no one is trying to hurt you." I laughed. "Oh, honey, you already did." Then I picked up the folder and tore it clean down the middle. Matthew stood. "Mom, what are you doing?" "Protecting myself," I said, rising to meet his gaze, which apparently is the only thing no one else here intends to do. I walked out of the room, my heart racing but steady. My hands shook, but from adrenaline, not fear. Behind me, I heard Elise hiss, "She's going to ruin everything." And for the first time, I felt it. Power. Not control, not dominance, just the simple act of saying no. And I realized something profound. They needed me confused. They needed me helpless. They needed me to give in. But I wasn't going to do that. Because I had one more secret, one they'd never see coming. And it was sitting just down the road in a storage unit I'd been paying for quietly every month since my husband passed. Inside it, evidence, letters, an old audio recorder, and a copy of a will, one they didn't know existed. It was Unit B47, a rust-colored door behind a chain-link fence tucked in the back corner of Everguard storage. No one knew about it. Not Matthew, not Elise, not even Rita. I rented it the year after my husband died. Not because I needed space, but because I needed safety. A place where the pieces of my life couldn't be thrown out rearranged or rewritten by someone else. The world had shifted after his death. Matthew changed. Elise entered our lives with her perfect hair and perfectly sharpened knives disguised as smiles. I felt something even then, so I started collecting things, quietly, protectively. Now I was back, keys cold in my palm, the door groaning as it rolled upward. Dust rose like a memory. Inside, everything was still where I left it, labeled boxes, plastic totes, my husband's military papers, our marriage license photos no one had cared to ask about, and the brown file folder with a red sticker on the spine, in case of emergency. I pulled it out and sat on the folding chair I'd left there years ago. Inside, the original deed to the house still in my name. A notarized revocation of the deed transfer I'd quietly filed before signing anything over to Matthew. A new will updated after Elise moved in, leaving everything to Jamie. And finally, a handwritten letter from my husband. One I'd forgotten he wrote until that very moment. "If they ever turn against you, Denise, remember who you were before all this. You're stronger than any room they try to put you in." I cried, not because I was weak, but because I realized I wasn't alone, not in the way Elise hoped. My past was still mine, and so was my future. I just needed to take it back one move at a time. I copied the documents, drove straight to Rita's. When she opened the door, she took one look at me and said, "Whatever it is, we're doing it." Together we scanned everything, filed backups in multiple places. One copy went to her lawyer. Another went into a timed email I scheduled to send to a select group of people if I didn't log in for 72 hours. and one I kept under the kitchen floorboard behind the loose tile Elise had always meant to fix. It was war now, but the battlefield wasn't screaming matches or court dates. It was breakfast smiles, fake compliments, and paper trails. They thought I was old. They thought I was fading. But what I was really doing was waiting. For the right moment. For the final move. And that moment came sooner than I expected. The next morning I found Elise in my room, rifling through my closet wearing gloves. She froze. I said nothing. She said you left the door open. But we both knew. The door had never been open. But the truth? That was wide open now. The gloves were what gave her away. No one wears latex gloves to tidy a closet unless they're worried about fingerprints. Elise, I said quietly, what exactly are you looking for? She straightened like a cat caught in a pantry. Oh, nothing. I just thought I'd help with some decluttering. You've got so many old coats in here. Strange, I replied, stepping into the room. Considering yesterday you told Matthew I was too fragile to go out in this weather. She paused. I never said that. I smiled. That's funny, because I remember it perfectly. My memory's funny that way. Selective and precise. She set the coat down. I'm trying to help Denise. You've been unwell. There it was, again, that word. Unwell. Their favorite script. The blanket excuse for everything, gaslight me, sedate me, steal from me, and still sound noble. I gestured to the window where frost had gathered along the corners. When I was unwell, Elise, I didn't walk 3 blocks to the post office yesterday, alone, in heels. Her eyes narrowed. You went to the post office? But she didn't ask why. She didn't ask what I mailed, because she already knew she was losing. Elise, I said, voice soft but pointed. Do you want me gone before Christmas? She didn't deny it. Instead, she tried a different mask. Sympathy. I just think it might be better for everyone. Less pressure, more peace. Peace. As if my existence was noise. As if my breath was conflict. And that's when I realized something deeper. This was never about my health. Or even the house. It was about legacy. I was the only one left who remembered Matthew before her. The only one who knew the cracks in their marriage weren't because of stress, but because of secrets. And the closer we got to Christmas, the more visible I became. To Jamie, to Rita, to Matthew's conscience. Elise wanted me gone before Jamie opened presents under the tree I decorated, before I could slip her the music box, before I could leave a note inside the copy of Charlotte's Web we used to read together telling her that the truth always survives, even if it hides in the walls for a while. Elise didn't just want me out of the house. She wanted me erased from the narrative. A peaceful holiday, she said, but I knew better. This wasn't about tinsel. It was about timing, because Elise had a plan, and I was finally ready to shatter it. I walked over to my jewelry box, pulled out a tiny red envelope, and handed it to her. What's this? She asked. A gift, I said. Early. She opened it slowly. Inside was a note. 5 words handwritten, nothing else. You should be very careful. I turned and walked out, because the next move wasn't hers anymore. It was mine, and it was coming. It had to be Matthew. He was the only one left who might still carry a flicker of conscience. A dim, reluctant ember beneath all the ash Elise had piled over him. So I wrote him a letter. Not a dramatic one, not the kind that begs or accuses. Just the kind only a mother can write. I waited until they left for Jamie's school recital. Elise had insisted I stay home, of course, in case I got tired, and I placed it carefully on their bed. The sheets were still rumpled from the night before. A woman like Elise didn't believe in making beds unless guests were coming. She believed in appearances, not peace. The letter read, Matthew, I know about the photo. I know about the pills. I know about the documents. I know more than you think I do. You used to be a good man. I raised you to be gentle even when the world asked you to be hard. I taught you how to tie your shoes and how to apologize when you hurt someone. This woman, she's made you forget, but I haven't. I haven't forgotten the little boy who cried when he thought he lost me in the grocery store. I haven't forgotten the teenager who wrote me a poem on Mother's Day because he couldn't afford flowers. I don't want to destroy you, Matthew, but I will protect myself. You've made it clear I have to. There's still time, not to undo it, but to walk away from it. To be a father Jamie can admire. To be a son I can miss when I'm gone, not mourn while I'm still alive. Don't sign anything else for her. Don't lie again on her behalf. Because next time, it won't be a letter I leave behind. It'll be testimony. Mom? That night something changed. Matthew didn't come down for dinner. Elise did her smile sharper than usual. She sat across from me, slowly slicing her chicken one deliberate cut at a time. You didn't come to the recital, she said coolly. You didn't really invite me, I replied. She looked up. We're done pretending, aren't we? I leaned in slightly. We were never pretending. You were performing. There's a difference. She pushed her plate away. He'll still choose me. I smiled. He already did. And you should be very, very nervous about what that means now. For the first time, her mask cracked. Because she didn't know what I'd given him. What else I might have. What else I might do. Later that night, I saw Matthew slip into Jamie's room and just stand there, staring, holding one of her stuffed animals like it might tell him how to fix things. He looked like a man unraveling. And Elise, she didn't sleep. I could hear her pacing. I could hear the creak of her closet floorboards. And I could feel it in my bones. She knew she was losing. And I knew the final move was coming. Because sometimes the most dangerous thing in a house full of liars is the quiet woman who knows where everything is buried. It happened just before midnight. The house had been lit up like a postcard all week. Elise insisted on it, of course. White string lights tracing every gutter, every bush, even the old oak tree in the yard. To impress the neighbors, she said. But that night every light went out. All at once. And the silence that followed was louder than any scream. I was in my room reading a book I'd pretended to forget I already read something Elise had once told the doctor, part of her little pattern of concern. I was waiting for something. I didn't know what exactly, but I felt it coming. When the lights blinked off, I stayed seated. No panic, no flashlight scramble, just the sound of Elise hissing Matthew's name down the hallway. Did you check the breaker? It's not the breaker, Elise, he snapped sharper than usual. It's the line, something blue. For once it wasn't about me, but I had already known it would happen, because I'd asked Rita's son, an electrician, for a favor that afternoon. Nothing permanent. Just enough to give the house one moment of pure disorienting darkness. Enough to tilt the stage. And sure enough, within 10 minutes, Elise was tearing through drawers with her phone flashlight, cursing under her breath. But it wasn't the power outage that unnerved her. It was what she found instead. Because while the house went dark, I had placed one thing in her desk drawer. A flash drive. Labeled simply, "For Jamie if I disappear." She screamed. I heard the crash of wood as she hurled something across the room. Then footsteps. Fast, furious. She flung my bedroom door open without knocking. I was still seated, still reading. You think this is funny? She snapped, holding the drive like it was poison. You think scaring people is some kind of game? I looked at her, slowly removed my reading glasses, and said, You should plug it in. She hesitated. You're bluffing, maybe I said. But the real one's already at the lawyer's office, and another's in Rita's freezer next to her pot roast. Her hands were shaking. She'd finally met something she couldn't charm, sedate, or whisper away. Truth. I stood up. You wanted me gone before Christmas, but here I am, still here, still watching, and now so is everyone else. She took a step back. You can't prove anything. I smiled. I don't need to. You'll undo yourself. You're already doing it. And then, like it had been waiting for the perfect moment, the electricity surged back on. The lights flickered to life. And there she stood, illuminated, in full, clutching the flash drive, caught between rage and collapse. Matthew appeared behind her in the hallway. He looked at her, then at me, and for the first time in years, his face wasn't clouded with confusion. It was clear, terrified, wounded, aware. Something had shifted. The lights didn't just come back on in the house. They came back on in him. And I knew as I sat back down that the end was coming. Not mine, hers. The next morning the kitchen was silent. No smell of coffee, no clatter of dishes. Just that tense waiting stillness, like the whole house was holding its breath. I sat at the table with my tea, the flash drive still resting in the center untouched. I'd placed it there deliberately, like a warning sign, or a trap. Elise didn't come downstairs, but Matthew did. He looked like he hadn't slept. Shirt, wrinkled eyes, bloodshot stubble shadowing his jaw. He walked past the flash drive without speaking, poured himself a mug of cold coffee, then sat across from me. We didn't say anything for a while, and then finally he asked the question I'd been waiting to hear since this all began. Mom, when did you stop trusting me? I blinked. My heart hurt in places I didn't know were still alive. I didn't, I said. He frowned. Then why all this? The letters, the warnings, the threats. I set my cup down. Because I did trust you. For too long. I thought you were under her spell. That if I stayed quiet, you'd remember who you were before her. But you didn't. He leaned forward, elbows on the table. She told me you were forgetting things. That you were wandering off. That you were... Slipping, I interrupted. She told you I was slipping. He swallowed. She told you exactly what she needed you to believe to get what she wanted. Control, the house, my accounts, my legacy, you. He stared at the flash drive. She said you made it all up. I raised an eyebrow. And do you believe her? His voice broke. I don't know what to believe anymore. I leaned in, suddenly tired, suddenly hollow. Believe what you saw with your own eyes, not what she whispered while you were too in love or too guilty to hear your own conscience. He stared at his hands. Then softly, what's on that drive? I tilted my head. Enough. Enough to ruin her. Enough to expose her. He closed his eyes. She's still the mother of my child. She's still your wife, I said, but she stopped being your partner a long time ago. And you, Matthew, you stopped being mine. The silence between us was centuries thick. Then he said something I didn't expect. I'm sorry. It wasn't a grand apology. It didn't erase anything. But it cracked something open. Because behind it was recognition. And grief. He reached across the table, his hand trembling. I didn't take it. Not yet, but I didn't pull away either. I need to know something, he whispered. If I ask her to leave, will you stay? I looked out the window. The snow was falling softly. Jamie's snowman still stood in the yard, crooked hat and all. I don't know, I said honestly, but I won't be erased. He nodded slowly. And I saw the boy again, the one who used to fall asleep in my lap, the one who once promised me he'd always protect me. Maybe he was still in there. Or maybe I was just ready to stop fighting for a version of him that no longer existed. Either way, Elise's reign was crumbling. And this house, it was about to remember who it belonged to. It happened quietly, no screaming, no slamming doors. Just a morning soaked in tension, like the sky knew something was about to split open. I heard Matthew's voice in the hallway, low, steady. Elise, we need to talk. She laughed, too sharp, too high. About what your mother's latest performance... No, he said, about yours. I sat in my room door, cracked just enough to hear. I didn't move, didn't breathe, just listened. Elise, he said, I read the file, the pill bottles, the emails, the elder care forms. You told Dr. Templeton things that weren't true. You lied. There was a long silence. Then her voice flat and dangerous. She manipulated you. No, he said, you did, for years. You're going to take her side, she snapped. After everything, after I've carried this family. You didn't carry us, he replied. You carried yourself, on my mother's back. I could hear her pacing. If you're serious about this, you'll regret it. You'll lose everything. Me, Jamie, the house. The house isn't yours, he said. It never was. Then the soft, unmistakable click of a suitcase zipper. She had packed, or maybe she'd been planning to. Where am I supposed to go? Matthew's voice dropped. I think you already know. Another pause. And then just above a whisper, her last line. You always were a mama's boy. I stood at the window and watched her walk down the front steps 20 minutes later. No bags, just a purse and her phone clutched in her hand like it might save her. No backward glance, no parting words, just Elise vanishing. And the lights in the house somehow felt brighter. Matthew came into my room not long after. He didn't say anything at first, just looked around like he was seeing it for the first time. I don't know how to fix this, he said. I closed my book. You don't, I replied. You just start. He rubbed the back of his neck. I let her get in my head. She didn't get in your head, I said gently. She fed the part of you that wanted to believe you were too busy to ask better questions. He winced. I thought you were slipping. I really did. I know. We sat there for a while watching Jamie play in the yard. He asked, are you going to stay? I didn't answer, because I wasn't sure. But I did know this, I wasn't afraid anymore. The house was mine again, not in ownership, but in presence. The music box was back on the dresser. The loose tile under the fridge had been quietly repaired by Matthew the night before. And Jamie Shee drew me a picture of a woman standing in a garden surrounded by roses. At the top she'd written, Grandma doesn't forget, she remembers everything. Elise had been right about one thing. I wasn't going to be around forever, but I would be remembered. On my terms. And the final chapter? That was mine to write. It was late again, nearly midnight. I was brushing my hair at the vanity, listening to the soft murmur of voices from down the hall. At first, my heart clenched. For a moment, I was back at the top of the stairs. For a moment, I was invisible again. But this time, I leaned in, I listened. Jamie's voice came first, sleepy, high-pitched, wrapped in the folds of childhood. Is Grandma staying forever now? Matthew chuckled softly the way he used to when he was still mine. She's not going anywhere, sweetheart. Not if I can help it. Jamie whispered something I couldn't catch. Then, she's the only one who remembers the names of all my stuffed animals. I smiled. Then Matthew said I messed up. Big. But I think Grandma knows I'm trying. Jamie replied she already knows. She always knows. My throat tightened. This house had held so many ghosts lately. Lies in the walls, poison in the teacups, whispers like knives. But now, the air was different. I walked to the window, pulled aside the curtain, and looked out at the street. Elise's car was gone for good. No calls, no letters, just silence. And in that silence, I began to hear something new. Not fear, not guilt, not secrets, but breath. My own. Strong, certain, still here. The next day, Matthew and I planted roses in the front yard. Red ones, just like the kind I had the year he was born. The soil was rich, the ground soft from the melt. He didn't ask for forgiveness again. He just dug, and I just handed him the clippers one thorny stem at a time. Jamie sat on the porch watching us like a tiny queen surveying her kingdom. The music box I gave her played beside her, slightly off-key, but still lovely. Later that evening, I sat at my desk and opened the diary I had started the night I first heard them whispering. I crossed out the title on the first page. I heard them whispering about a future without me, and wrote beneath it, "But I'm still here. Still here, still breathing, still me. And if anyone ever tries to write me out of the story again, I'll remind them. I remember everything, and now, so does everyone else."